Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest on the line, Ryan Holiday.
Hey guys, how are you?
Ryan is one of my favorite authors. Ego is the enemy, obstacle is the way. I read a daily affirmation book every day called The Daily Stoic. That's all my man Ryan Holiday, and he's got a new book out right now called Lives of the Stoics. So Ryan, why is Stoicism, Stoics, why are they so significant to you?
Yeah, we'll break it down because a lot of people don't know what it actually means.
Yeah. So the Stoics were a group of philosophers in ancient Greece and ancient Rome who I know when people hear that word philosophy, you think sort of abstract, you think college professor, you think totally unusable in the real world. But in truth, the Stoics were generals, and they were teachers, and they were soldiers, and merchants and writers. They were real people in the real world. So to me, what philosophy is a sort of a guide for thriving and surviving turbulent times. Like the Stoics survived plagues, and they survived shipwrecks and wars and political chaos. Like, you know, there's that Chinese expression, may you live in interesting times, as sort of a curse. The Stoics lived in times just like these. And what they wrote was really a prescription for being resilient and for also being a good person inside of that.
You know, you start off the book with a quote that I've always read about philosophy. He says, the only reason to study philosophy is to become a better person. Anything else is just a critique of words by means of using other words. Is this true? Like, do you believe it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can, you know, when you hear philosophers talk, they're using all these big words. They're talking about these unpronounceable philosophers from a long time ago. You know, they ask these complicated questions like, how do we know we're not living in a computer simulation? Or, you know, I don't know if you've ever heard of the trolley problem, but there's all these like complicated questions that philosophers ask, like, how do we know if we have free will or not? I mean, all that's really interesting to me, but I think what Stoicism is about is like, how do you control your temper? You know, how much is the right amount of ambition to have, right? What are our obligations to the less fortunate? What is excellence really mean? And so and the Stoics were people who had jobs, who owned companies, who wrote books, you know, who performed in front of audiences. So they weren't thinking about these things as far as like what makes for a really interesting, you know, discourse, or, you know, what would make for a really provocative question to ask. They were thinking about like, how do you raise your kids, you know, or how do you respond when somebody insults you? Or, you know, for a big chunk of the Stoics, they were living under Nero's regime. So, you know, they would have understood a Donald Trump-like character very well, and all the temptations and dilemmas that come along with a leader like that.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of it is based on, it's not that you can control the situations that are happening, but you can control your reaction to it. And I feel like that's something we practice in everyday life also.
I mean, yeah, never before have we had to, more than ever before, we're having to wrestle with this idea that so much of the universe is outside of our control. You know, like you guys didn't choose to be working from home. I didn't choose for my wife to give me a haircut yesterday. These are just the realities of the situation that we're in, and we're having to adjust to it. And I think we're really realizing that, and this is a really key Stoic concept, being angry about it, being resentful about it, being sad about it, complaining about it, it doesn't really do anything about the situation. We have to focus on where we can actually have impact. So the Stoics say, like, the main thing we always control is our emotions. What do we feel about that? And then that determines what we're going to be able to do about it.
What about being angry that Donald Trump not paying taxes?
Well, I think, you know, a key Stoic virtue is justice, right? The idea of fairness, the idea of honesty. And so I think the Stoics would, of course, be appalled that someone is not just defrauding their government, which I think is very clear what Trump is doing, but that someone would lie about it, and that someone would make, like, it's not, I think just defrauding the government on your taxes is wrong for one reason. But the real reason I think the Stoics would find that objectionable is that by shirking one's responsibilities, you're forcing other people to carry your weight. And I think at the core of Stoicism is the idea like each of us has to carry our own weight, but most of all, those of us who are successful, who are talented, who have been blessed or fortunate, we have the highest obligation to carry our own weight. And to me, that's what's so morally repugnant about the idea of the president of the United States paying $750 in taxes.
I was going to ask, what did you learn the most about writing this book? Doing your homework and research. What was the biggest thing that you learned?
I mean, to me, what I learned is that these were like real flesh and blood humans. Like, so Seneca is one of the most interesting Stoics. He's exiled from Rome by one emperor, but then he's called back by another leader. But the catch is he has to be Nero's advisor. So imagine if, you guys get kicked off the radio, and then the only way to get back on the radio is to make some moral compromise that you're deeply uncomfortable with, but you know that through your show you can do good and you can provide for your family and you can have impact. It's such a, the idea that, people are totally good and bad is I think too simple. The reality is human beings are self-interested. Human beings have good impulses and bad impulses. And so I was just so fascinated with someone like Seneca who's striking this morally complex bargain, and it turns out to be the wrong one. But like a lot of people probably currently working for the Trump administration, is somehow convinced themselves that they're actually doing something very selfless.
Yeah, folks can't deal with nuance like they used to. When I read these stories, about Stoicism, it's almost like people can understand nuance better then than they do now, because everything isn't right. Everything isn't totally wrong. Like, it's cultural context to everything.
I think that's right. And also, like, I think we've sort of lost the ability to worship real heroism also, though. So like for all of Seneca's sort of moral complexity, there were other Stoics under Nero who were like, no, not on my watch. I'm going to go down fighting this. And so, these were the real heroes of the ancient world. And we've lost, I think, the ability to really celebrate those kinds of people and to set them up as an example. So that, like, for instance, the Stoics who were resisting Nero, there was something called the Stoic Opposition, which is a little bit like what we call the resistance today. But these were Stoics like who said, Nero can kill me, but he can't harm me. These were guys willing to face exile and death and torture to stand up for what they thought was right. They were inspired by an earlier generation of Stoics. So I think, to me, what's so disappointing about where we are politically is not just where we are, but that so many of our leaders have just sort of rolled over and taken it. You know what I mean? That they're just like, I don't know. To me, there's nothing less inspiring than a bootlicking sycophant. You know what I mean?
That's real. And that's what most Democrats look like. No, not even most Democrats. Most Democrats look like that because they take all the BS from the Republicans. But the people in the Republican Party who should know better, they look like that too, because they're taking all of this from Trump.
Yeah, I mean, the reason our government is set up the way that it is that a senator has a longer term than a president. And somehow these senators are even though they have job security for the next 6 years, are afraid to cross the president because they don't want him to send an angry tweet about them, and in the ancient world, when you defied Nero, he could take your property, he could send you far away, he could kill you. And so for the Stoics to resist, there's this famous story I tell in the book where one of the Stoics, a guy named Agrippinus, he's invited to this party that Nero is throwing. And another philosopher comes to him and says, hey, I got invited to this party. I was thinking about going. Should I go? And Agrippinus says, yeah, you should go. And he says, but you're not going. Why should I go? And Agrippinus just looks at him and he says, because you were even thinking about going. And I think the idea of drawing really clear ethical lines of what you will and won't do is part and parcel of being a good person and being a good leader. And the fact that we have these leaders now who can't even decide, hey, this, calling veterans who died in our wars suckers and losers, I'm not even going to draw the line there, you know, or Ted Cruz. I live in Texas. He's our senator. It's like, if somebody insulted my wife, you know, that's going to be the end of my working relationship with that person. But we have this sort of spineless generation of politicians. And I think the Stoics are a great example of people with real character and commitment to their ideals.
You know, there's so many discussions about being a boss and boss talk, and talk about the importance of being a servant also.
Well, I think, you know, being a servant of someone else is, I think, shameful, but being the servant of a cause, to me, is noble and the right thing to do. So when we talk about servant leadership, we're not talking about a leader who tells everyone what they want to hear. A servant leader puts the cause above themselves. You know, the famous example of Abraham Lincoln in the Civil War is he believes he's going to be defeated in re-election, but he decides, hey, this is what I'm going to, like, I'm committed to this cause through and through, and I'm not going to do the politically expedient thing, even though it might increase my chances of re-election. So when I think of servant leaders, I think about people who have a really strong purpose, a commitment to something, and that's more important than anything else.
What's the most valuable thing you learned from Stoicism that has helped you in 2020?
There's a great line from one of the founders of Stoicism. His name is Zeno, and he said, "Well-being is realized by small steps, but it's no small thing." And so I think, you know, when people are trying to change their life, whether it's losing weight or, you know, get out of depression, which I know you talk about, Charlamagne, or just, you know, become more productive, we want to have these like giant epiphanies or this immediate transformation. But I think it's actually about small steps, one foot in front of the other. So maybe it's just waking up 5 minutes earlier, or maybe it's just about cutting one thing out of your diet, or it's just about deciding to read one page of a book every day. So I think the idea that progress is something we inch ourselves to or towards is really important, not just personally, but I also think we've got to realize this politically, right? Like the way we're going to dig ourselves out of this mess is not by one savior or one magical law. It's going to be about first throwing the bums out of office, and then secondly, replacing them with better and better people over a period of years. So, you know, I think everyone wants a shortcut, everyone wants a quick fix, but the reality is we get better step by step.
Well, let's talk about a small step. You donated 10 grand to fund the relocation of Confederate statues in Texas. Why is that such an important move for where we're trying to go as a country?
So I live in a small town outside Austin, and every day when I walk to my office, we see this Confederate statue. And I think a lot of people think these statues were put up right after the Civil War. This statue was put up in 1910. That's 50 plus years after the Civil War. It's like if somebody in Germany today said they wanted to put up a monument to the soldiers, to the German veterans who died in World War II, we'd know they're a neo-Nazi, right? We'd know what's up. And so I pass this statue every day, and when people started talking about taking it down after the protests, you know, over the death of George Floyd, I just thought, here's what I think is going to happen. People are going to talk a big game about this. And then ultimately the government's going to say, well, we'd like to do it. We just don't have the money to take it down. And they were estimating it would take about $10,000 to move this statue, another $10,000 to move another statue. And so I just said, like, what could I do? I could write a check for that much. And so I wrote it, and they're in the process of finding a spot to relocate the monument. They're trying to raise a little more money here in Bastrop County for the other one. If people want to donate, I think it's Bastrop. If you just search Bastrop Confederate Monument, it'll come up. But the idea is no person of any color or gender, in my view, should have to walk past a monument to some of the worst people in the history of this country to pay a traffic fine or to frankly be on trial for their life. I mean, this is in front of a courthouse where, you know, real matters of criminal and civil liability are discussed. I just find it disgusting that you'd have to pass this giant middle finger on the way in to do your business.
Yeah,
Where do they move it to?
They're going to move. Hopefully, they're going to move it to a cemetery outside of town. The idea being, like, it is a 100-year-old statue. You can't just knock it down. But the idea that this would be paid for by city funds to maintain in front of the monument on the way into the court, I think we can all agree has got to go.
Yeah, I see the website, Bastrop Confederate Monument Relocation Fund.org.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, I want everybody I'm gonna donate some money to it too. I can't see how much more they need because it won't let me log on to the website for some reason. But yeah, if you're listening to the Breakfast Club right now, go to Bastrop Confederate Monument Relocation Fund.org.
Spell it, please.
BASTROP.
There you go.
Confederate Monument Relocation Fund. Yeah, go there and donate $1 or $2 and let's get that moved, man. Why not? Now, I would like to know, how can studying Stoicism change the quality of somebody's life? Because they're hearing us talk right now and they're like, yeah, sure, yeah, all I gotta do is study that and it'll change the quality of my life. Can it?
Well, yeah. Talk to me about your morning routine. You said you take a minute before you get going. You read some pages, maybe you journal, you think. To me, I want to start the day with not just study, but some sort of advice or prompts that make me a better person, that encourage me to be what I know that I can be. And so for me, I try to do my study in the morning. I read a little bit. I write in a journal. And I think what Stoicism is a framework, a set of sort of ethical ideas that will call you to be your better self. And that idea of affirmations you mentioned is a big part of it. I want to be encouraged in the morning. And then in the evening, I try to take a little bit of time and review and go, hey, where did I fall short? What could I have done better? Who did I help? Who did I hurt? And I want to, like we said, I want to get a little bit better every single day.
Well, what's today? We're gonna add this on the 29th, Ryan. So what's the day? Give us the Daily Stoic from the day.
Well, I don't have the Daily Stoic memorized, but we do an email. We do an email every day for Daily Stoic as well. It's totally free. And today's email is the idea that although people can hurt you, we choose whether we're harmed. Right. So the Stoic concept today is about choosing not to be a victim. So that's not to say there are not injustices, there's not wrongs in the world. Of course they are, but we choose if we're going to let that hold us back, if we're going to feel harmed by that. And so that's a really important idea. Maybe an easier, less controversial way to think about this is like political correctness, right? Like somebody says something, but we choose to be offended by that thing. And so if we realize that we have the power over our own reactions, we can then focus our energy on righting the injustice, on addressing the wrong, rather than expending all that energy, on our feelings or on the pain that we feel because of what was done to us.
I posted this morning.
So you don't have to go back and forth with people on social media.
Totally. There's not a bigger waste of time than trying to convince people that are unconvincible in the first place.
Like convincing people that it's important to vote. There's people on social media that's like, you're an idiot. It's like, all right, I'm not going to convince you how important it is that you get out there and make sure you're registered to vote and you vote.
Well, a great one I heard is like masks, right? Obviously, we need as many people as possible to wear masks. Correct. But we don't need everyone to wear a mask. So if you're spending your energy yelling at that one idiot, that one Karen who's a mask denier, that's energy you're not spending on someone who actually can be convinced. And to go to your point about voting, it's like, sure, obviously we need as many people to vote as possible, but maybe that energy is best spent trying to get somebody who wasn't sure who they were going to vote for to vote for the right person, So I think it's the Stoics were really big on making sure you're spending your energy where it's going to have a difference. Not, Marcus Aurelius says, look, you can hold your breath till you're blue in the face. They're going to keep being crazy, and you just have to accept that.
Question, right? Because what you said is very true. Because I actually posted something like that this morning. I said, healed people hear differently. Right?
Yes.
But there are times when you hear something and you like, what? And you want to respond because it's such bullshit, right? So I guess my question is there ever a good time to respond or lead with ego?
Well, I think we can respond, but without ego. So are you responding to this person because they hurt you and you want to hurt them back? Or are you responding to this person because you want to make it clear to everyone, for instance, that you're not going to tolerate bullying or racism or sexism or something like that? So I think when I think about it, and I respond to things sometimes too, you'll see somebody saying something in your Instagram. I want to make sure I'm responding so that message doesn't convince the wrong people. You know what I mean? I'm trying not to respond from a place of fragileness or insecurity. If somebody's like, you're fat, and you're like, no, you're fat, you're not accomplishing anything. But if somebody says something anti-Semitic on your Instagram, maybe you're going to stop and go, hey, here's why I don't accept stuff like this. And to take a stand, because I do think there is this idea, if we ignore bad people, sometimes they're just escalating and that's having an impact as well.
Or somebody is just putting out wrong information. Like you hear somebody talking and the things that they're saying just aren't true, and that's going to influence somebody else negatively. Like you want to speak out against it.
Yeah, or it's like, look, you don't have to respond to random people on the internet. But if your mom posts something on Instagram or on Facebook that's totally wrong, maybe that's where you want to have a conversation. So I think, the Stoics had this idea of our circles of influence. And at the center of your circle of influence is yourself. And then it's your immediate family. Then it's your extended family. Then it's your friends. Then it's maybe your fans. And so thinking about influencing people in that order, but oftentimes we get distracted by this one random person. And frankly, we don't even realize that, that's a Russian troll, or that's some paid operative or something. Like a lot of times we're getting bogged down in stuff that's not even real. And we're actually playing right into the hands of the people that are trying to divide us.
Now, we always say about the pursuit of riches and fame and how evil that can be, but you can still be virtuous and also pursue these desires.
Oh, totally. So Seneca was one of the richest men in all of Rome. And what he said is, look, it's better to be tall than short. It's probably better to be rich than poor. But a wise person, a good person, will manage to make the best of either of those things. So the Stoics tried to be indifferent. And indifferent doesn't mean you don't like it. It just means that hey, I've got the money, I might as well enjoy it, but I'm not going to be so concerned about losing it that I'm anxious or worried. And also, I'm not going to let it go to my head and make me think that I'm better than other people just because I have it. And look, I think money, like all things, is a tool. It's just how you decide to use that tool and to what cause you put it to use.
Should you be upset when people that don't have more money than you say they have more money than you? That's
should you be
ego, right?
Should you be upset when other people have more than you?
No. When other people who don't have more money than you say they have more money than you, is that
when people lie?
Come on.
Insecurity. Who cares?
That's insecurity. That's saying why. Who said what?
You can choose how you react to something like that.
Who said what?
Yeah, I was going to say we should ask DJ Envy about that, because what you're describing is the sin of envy.
Yeah. Who said that to you, Charlamagne?
It don't matter who said it. I'm just saying, when somebody says something like that,
well, is it true?
It's ego to react, right? Like, and be like, "Are you tripping?"
Well, is it true, Charlamagne? That's the first question.
It's so not true. And that's the problem.
So there's
it's not true, Charlamagne. You shouldn't have to worry about it.
I know that, but my ego says I'm about to stun on this fool.
How do you know it's not true?
Oh, I know it's not true.
There's a funny exchange. So Epictetus, he's one of the Stoics, and somebody insulted him. They said something bad about him, and he said, "Oh, if only you really knew me, you'd say something much worse." And so maybe I think about it like that. They're focusing on the wrong thing. You don't want them digging in your real private business and finding something to criticize.
I get it. That makes sense. So what is the Stoic?
The definition of Stoic today seems like it's somewhat different than what the definition was back then.
Yeah, so I think there's a big difference between lowercase stoicism and uppercase stoicism. So lowercase stoicism, that's the word you're talking about, like has no emotions, just endures pain, is no fun. And stoicism, the philosophy is a vibrant way of living. Just like, we think the word Epicurean means like a hedonist who just sort of is obsessed with pleasure. But in the ancient world, that's not what the Epicureans were either. It's just one of those things where like the word has come to mean the opposite of whatever it's meant, which is unfortunate. But one of the reasons I think we got to dig into stuff.
What is the Stoic philosophy that could help the average everyday American during these times we're in right now?
That's a good question. I mean, Marcus Aurelius, he says, the fruit of this life is good character and works for the common good. And so he says, like, in dark times, when you think things are bad, he's like, you have a fountain of goodness within you. If you want to see good, do good. And to me, like that's one of the reasons I paid to move that monument. That's one of the reasons I've started to get to work on different causes that I care about. It's like when you feel like the world is falling to pieces and everyone is a bad person or everyone is being selfish and rude, like the one thing you can do to change that opinion is to start with yourself. And so I think for the Stoics, it's like we're all on the same team. We're all in this together. And if you want to be reminded of that, just go do something good yourself. And I think that has the wonderful effect also of just taking your mind off your own troubles as well.
That's great. Wasn't one of them also, if you can't do good, then at least don't do harm?
Yeah, and that's such a great line. Yeah, I think that the Stoics really had all these sort of like great sayings that they would remind. Like Epictetus, he says, it's not things that upset us, it's our opinion about things. And that's something I like. Look, the pandemic is the pandemic. Me telling myself that it's the worst thing that ever happened, that it's going to ruin my life, that I'll never get this moment back, that all the momentum of my career is gone. These are just opinions that we're making up that are making an already hard situation harder than it needs to be. And we can see the good. Like, I'm sure, look, you guys would rather be in the studio, but you're working from home and there are positives and negatives to that. What are you going to choose to see?
Right. Man, that Epictetus, am I pronouncing it right?
Epictetus.
That Epictetus quote is so fundamental to life, man. It's not things that upset us. It's our opinion about them that does. And we don't realize that one simple choice could cause us from making a bad decision. You know what I mean? Like I had a homeboy yesterday tell me, like, if I heard such and such say this, I'd be pulling up to their house, yada, yada, yada. And I'm sitting there saying to him, like, for what? Why?
Right.
Like, why would that person's opinion cause you to do something that's going to make you lose everything? Like,
well, and look, Epictetus was a slave. Epictetus spent 30 years in Roman slavery, which is like the worst kind of slavery you could imagine. And he's ultimately disabled because of it. He loses partial use of one of his legs. But he says, slavery is an impediment to the body, not to the mind. And what he means is that it was even possible for him to find freedom inside that slavery. And he compared himself to, he was in Nero's court. So he watched these rich Romans coming and kissing Nero's ass and how scared they were and he realized that even though he was a slave, he was actually freer than these people who were addicted to power and success and money and status and fame. And so I think, when we hear these quotes from the Stoics, we shouldn't think that they're just, some clever guy throwing up, messages on Twitter. Like, he really knew, like, that was coming from his core being, and it came from that wisdom came from a lot of suffering.
Wow. So I guess is there anything we can control, Ryan?
Well, we control our own opinions. We control our own actions. We control our own beliefs. We control our own ethical standards, and we control whether we give up on them or not. One of the most sort of jaw-dropping things I ever heard from the Stoics, Seneca says, if they can force you to do something that you think is wrong, he says, then you don't know how to die. And so I like, to me, that like hit, it's like, oh man. And then it reminds you of these leaders who are just, they're like, well, if I don't do what Trump says, then I won't get reelected. And then I'll just be a millionaire lobbyist, you know, and I'll write my book deal. Woe is me. You know, it's like, if they can only, no one can force you to do something that you think is wrong, or no one can force you to abandon your belief in what is right. That's something that we relinquish, we let go of. Like, and that's just something I try to remind myself of always.
So based off the history that you've studied, are we in a great time or a bad time, or is it just based on how you look at it?
Well, I think the Stoics would say it doesn't matter. Is this the worst moment or the best moment? Now's when you're alive. So what are you going to do with it? But, you know, Marcus Aurelius survived 15 years of the Antonine Plague, which killed millions of people. I mean, exactly 100 years ago, America was, you know, in the throes of the Spanish flu, which killed 50 million people. You know, as bad as this is, I'd much rather be alive right now than serving in the trenches of World War I. You know, and so I think that it's always good to have some perspective. That's not to say there aren't really serious things that we have to adjust, and that we don't owe it to future generations to make real progress and change right now. But I think, you know, arguably things are better than they've ever been before.
Listen, man, Lives of the Stoics is available right now. My man Ryan Holiday. Ryan is literally like top 3 favorite author for me. Like, period. Like, if you've never read any of Ryan's books, you really need to, man. You should start with Ego is the Enemy, because I swear every day I am in a battle with my ego, and I know that. You know what I'm saying? Which makes it easier for me to fight it and contain it.
Well, Charlamagne and Angela and Envy, I know you guys don't have a lot of philosophers on the show. I appreciate you making an exception for me, and you guys are doing such important work, helping regular people wrap their heads around all these essential issues of our time. I just love the impact you guys are having politically. And it, you know, the Stoics are saying, look, we don't control the world, but we can't have influence over the world. I think you guys are a great example of people who are changing the discourse of politics in this country. And politicians know that they have to come on the Breakfast Club because you guys have built a platform that influences.
Word.
Thank you so much, Ryan. We always appreciate you.
Ryan Holiday, thank you, brother.
Peace, bro.
Breakfast Club, come on.